So it's time for the 15,000 mile update in this AHU install in this Vanagon factory diesel 83. Actually, we're closer to 16,000 miles, and I think it's been 8 months since I put this in, something like that. And a couple guys, I think, had left some comments on, asking me to post an update and just kind of let people know how it's been, how it's performed over these, the last few months and the miles that I put on it. So here we are. The answer is excellent, just outstanding. There's been a couple tiny little things, that have popped up, but nothing major. I'll get to those in a second. Overall, the thing, like I said, it's been just phenomenal. It has run just perfect, literally 100% perfect in running and starting, just absolutely glitchless across the board in all conditions. I took this thing on a kind of a grueling torture test this past August here, and I designed a route, around the West. I was looking for just the nastiest, longest hill climbs and the hottest deserts and just the most extreme conditions possible, like the highest passes that I could find. And I ended up, the route I ended up taking was from Washington down to Tahoe, across Highway 50 in Nevada to Utah and Moab and Four Corners and all that. Then I went to Arizona and California down through the deserts and over to LA, and then up through the valley, the California Valley to Yosemite, and then back up. And as you can imagine, in August it was just blazing hot, just grueling conditions. And this thing performed phenomenally. The temperature is kind of the main thing that I was looking at. I was really looking to see how cool it stayed, and how well it ran and how cool it stayed. And it was just rock solid, even in the most extreme conditions. I mean, these were some of the hottest conditions, temperatures in the country, and it was over 115 degrees in some places, for days. And I was going across these deserts, for hours on end, and this thing was absolutely perfect. Just the temperature stayed right where it wanted to be, didn't complain a bit, never even came close to even getting hot, really. I mean, going up some of the longest grades, I mean, the temperature would come up a little bit, like you would expect it to, but nothing, even close to being hot, and, as soon as you got to the summit, it would cool right back down again, immediately. It would go right back down to temperature and stay there, just rock solid. And I attribute that to just the way it's set up. The cooling system is properly bled. We bleed it with vacuum, as I think I've mentioned in other posts. Use a vacuum mechanism to bleed it, get the air out of it, and there's not a bit of air in it, and that's what gives you such excellent cooling and such stable temperatures. A lot of guys talk about, I always see people talking about how they overheat in these things. They get these overheating issues, and I'm like, geez, that's just not something's not right, because a diesel engine properly set up is just a cool running engine. They're just cool characters. And we've seen, they take forever to heat up, and they just run cool in general. And we've seen like diesels, like big semis in the wintertime and they put the flap over the front, over the radiator. And to my knowledge, what I've always been told is that's so they can just stay warm, because they overcool in the winter, because the diesel is just such a cool running engine that they got to put those flaps on it so they can get some heat in the thing, so that it'll stay warm. So yeah, I mean, just diesels are real cool characters, and this one's no exception. I mean, it was just phenomenal in the heat. Just the hotter it got, 115, 120. I mean, just blazing hot where I was, and it just ran perfectly. I just loved it. In fact, it actually seemed to run better the hotter it got. I noticed it ran smoother. It seemed to have a little more power, and the mileage was a little bit better the hotter the conditions got out. And I wasn't expecting that. I was real pleasantly surprised by that. This thing just loves the heat, and that's good, because I love going to hot places. So now I have the ideal vehicle for that. So yeah, AHU, properly set up, just a phenomenal machine. And the mileage has just been outstanding. The mileage has been up close to 30, low 30s, 35 sometimes, never under 30. So just a fantastic machine. And I also contribute how well it runs, to just how consistent it is, how it starts perfectly every time, runs, like I said, 100% perfectly all the time. I attribute that to the MTDI pump that Carr Mullendor built. you know, it's a brand new pump, and you know, he knocked it out of the park. I mean, that guy's just great. And also, you know, I got these new, the Bosio 520 DLC injectors, and a big thing also, I think, is this K&N filter. You know, so I have this wonderful free-flowing air filter here, and that's just, I think has made a big difference. You know, because I see a lot of people, they run these Donaldson filters, and they're really restrictive, you know, on the CFM, the cubic feet per minute, and I think that really has a lot to do with it. How well this thing's run and how well it's performed. But yeah, just outstanding how this thing's been. And oh yeah, I should mention, I haven't put the intercooler in it. So all of this testing that I've done and driving has been with no intercooler. So just, yeah, I mean, it's in just those blazing hot conditions, no intercooler, it was just fine. And I don't have an EGT gauge. I drive it by feel, and I've talked about this before with some people, kind of debated with them, and I just believe that, you know, you can drive it by feel. You know, you can tell when you're bogging an engine down on a long grade. You know what's going on in that motor, and you know, you just don't do that. You treat it right. You can feel it. You know, if you feel yourself bogging down, shift to a lower gear, slow down a little bit, and enjoy the ride, and keep that motor spinning. You know, keep that motor happy and singing along, and it'll stay real cool for you, and you don't have to worry about it. And that's just the way I drive it, and it's been outstanding. Couple of the little things I'm trying to think about that that have gone wrong, little tiny things. I had a little tiny fuel leak, like a seep, and it was coming. I noticed it coming out of this area, kind of right down here, and it would just I had a little moisture here, and I noticed it was collecting in a little depression here in the block down there. There's a little puddle, and it wasn't enough so it was running down the motor or anything like that, but just a little puddle there. And I watched it for a while, and I got around to fixing it, and I asked Carl, you know, Carl Mullendor, you know, who built this pump here. I said, you know, hey, what do you think that could be? And he said, well, check this little guy here. He says, check this 12 millimeter bolt that's right here, where you set the injection timing. And he says, you know, that's got a little crush washer on it, as you can see. And he says, sometimes those will fail, you know, because you've taken it out a couple times to do the timing and this and that. And those will fail. And he says, yeah, try that. And a real nice guy, he sent me a little package of them free of charge. And I put one of those in, and sure enough, that was absolutely it. And it's been bone dry ever since. So that's, you know, one tiny little thing. Another thing is my exhaust brackets. I've had little problems with those. This little guy cracked right here, if you can see it. This OEM exhaust hanger developed a crack, and I had to weld it. And on the other side actually, when I put this new exhaust system in, when I did this install, it had a rubber hanger right here. Okay, this bracket was mounted to this motor mount, you know, this hanger here, with a rubber isolator. Okay, and that was on the original 1.6 install, you know, the original factory install, and I believe that was OEM. And what I'm thinking is the other side had one too, and the previous owner before me must have taken it off. So this is, I believe, and I'm going to research it more, but I believe this is supposed to be set up, you know, using those rubber isolators. And I'm going to go ahead and just source a couple more isolators and put those in. And, you know, after I do the research and make sure that's the way it came from the factory, I'm going to put some of those in and see if I can cure that. But just a little tiny thing. You know, you can see this guy's developing a tiny little crack here because it's hard mounted to this. So I'm going to put those rubber isolators back in, and I think that'll be the end of that. But otherwise, this exhaust has been, you know, just tremendous. You know, it's just rock solid. No problems at all. Real tough. Otherwise, yeah, nothing really to report. You know, it's just been a tremendous machine, you know, like I said, in all conditions, just blazing heat to now, when it's getting a little colder here in Washington. It's last time, a couple weeks ago, it seems like it was in the 20s. And even last night it got down pretty cold. It was below freezing. I don't know how cold it got, but I think, yeah, last week it was in the 20s, and I'd go out to start it in the morning, and starts up instantly. You know, just immediately starts up and runs a little sluggish for a few seconds, you know, 3-4 seconds. It'll kind of creep along, kind of run kind of sluggish. And then just as soon as it, you know, generates enough heat, it just takes right off. It runs great. I don't have a block heater. So that's one thing that I'd like to get, but you know, around here doesn't get super cold, so it's not that big a deal, I don't think. But I would like to get a block heater. But yeah, otherwise, just a tremendous machine. I highly recommend, putting an AHU in one of these things. Just a great way to go. But transmission. If you've watched my other videos, I mentioned what I have in this for transmission. It has the stock, the original DX 5-speed, which is an 094 transmission, and we put a 457 ring and pinion in it, okay, to give it taller gearing, and that's just not enough. Okay, so I will say, if you're thinking about doing this, the big takeaway I've gotten from this, as far as the transmission in this last few months, is that you got to get really tall gearing in these things, because these motors just make so much power, that they just beg for the long legs on the highway. This thing, it loves 55. It's just cruising along at 55. And I don't have a tachometer, but once again, I just drive by feel, and I can feel what this motor's doing, and it just loves 55. 60 is pretty good too. It likes 60, but 65 is like, it's starting to kind of complain a little bit. And 70 is just too much altogether. It doesn't like 70 at all. You can really hear the motor back there complaining. It just doesn't like it. So with all the power this thing makes, it could easily, it's a 5-speed, and it could easily take, if I had a hypothetical 6th above that, and even a 7th. I mean, this thing has so much power, it could just pull a lot higher gearing. So a takeaway, that I'll give you guys is that if you're thinking about doing this, really think the transmission through, and take the time and spend the money to gear the shit out of these things. Like, put the 457 in, do whatever you have to do. You can also put, and what I'm going to do is put a higher 4th and 5th in, Weddell, and I don't know who else makes, some higher gears you can put in there. And I'm just going to gear this thing to the max what money will buy, because then it'll just be just incredible, because it's wonderful at 55 and 60, especially 55. It's wonderful on back roads. It's just a dream to drive. But then when you get on the interstate, and everybody's doing 75 and 80, like in California, and you're doing 60 and 65, it's like, not quite as good. But yeah, so think the transmission through. But in any case, there it is. Yeah, it's just been outstanding. Couple little tiny glitches, that I pointed out, but nothing serious. Overall, just a wonderful machine. So highly recommended. In any case, yeah. So guys, any questions at all? As always, just kind of hit me up, and I'll do my best to help you out.